Hello, my name is John, and I'm going to go through a quick tutorial on how to install and configure an Apache web server on Linux. The distribution that I am using in this tutorial is CentOS version 7.4. This is a fairly recent release as of December 2017. So you're going to want to start off by logging into your system as either the root user or a user that has sudo privileges, whichever you prefer. I'm using root. And I recommend to start off with a yum update just to make sure all of the packages on your system are up to date going forward. As you can see here, everything's up to date. So, next step, yum install httpd. And this is going to go out and get the httpd package and install it, download it, install it on your system. Complete. And if we do an Apache ctl-v, we can see that it loaded Apache version 2.4.6 successfully. So let's take a look at the configuration. If we change directory to /etc httpd/conf and take a look, we can see that it created an httpd.conf file. And if we open that up, we can see this is essentially a main configuration file for Apache. So it's going to have a lot of global server settings and directives for the web server. For this demo, I'm going to leave everything on the defaults. Generally speaking, 9 times out of 10, you can probably do the same unless you have some sort of more advanced configuration that you want to run on your web server, or if you want to tweak things. So it's good to keep in mind that that file is there and exists. Let's go to /etc httpd/conf.d next. And this directory is where you're going to have configurations for your virtual hosts or virtual web servers. Apache can serve multiple hosts and different domain names, different port numbers, each with different unique settings if you want. We're going to keep things really simple, and we're going to create a vhost.conf file. And in here, we're going to define just a single virtual host for a basic server for HTTP. So I'm going to go to insert mode and paste this in here. So this is kind of the minimum kind of template, if you will, of a base config for a virtual host server. This first directive here defines the new virtual host. Any IP address, so any traffic destined for any IP address on port 80, any indicated by the asterisk, is going to be checked against this virtual host definition. So the first directive here, server admin, this is an administrative option. And you can see here I am using a public domain name for this demo, mostly-broken.net. Server name, this is the actual target server name that a user would type into their browser, right? The domain name. So in this case, test01.mostly-broken.net. Server alias really is not required, but I added that in here, and it's going to be the same as our server name. Document root is the directory that Apache is going to, the root directory that it will use to serve up the web files for this virtual host. Okay, so var www.html is most likely already created on your system. And then I recommend to create separate directories within that for each of your virtual host definitions. So in this case, we'll create these directories. Public HTML is where it's going to look for that index file to load your web server. And that's where you're going to want to put all your other web files, whether it be HTML or PHP or JavaScript or whatnot. Error messages, log messages can also be contained in a specific directory for the virtual host as well. So let's save this, Control-C:\wq. And now we need to actually create those directories. So if we go back and look at those directories here again, let's do a make dir-p to include parent directories. And we're going to create the public HTML directory. And then we're also going to create the logs directory as well. Okay. Next step, we need to enable and start the Apache service. So if we do a systemctl enable httpd.service we'll start it on boot, and then systemctl start httpd.service. We'll go ahead and start it, and we can check with status httpd.service to make sure that it is indeed actually running, and we can see that it is. So the next step, before we test this out, I am running CentOS 7 in this example, and by default there is a firewall turned on, firewall D service. If you're running an older version of Linux, it might be IP tables, but this is fairly common. And by default, firewall D is going to block any inbound connections on port 80. So what you would normally want to do is we'd want to go in and we'd want to configure the firewall to allow traffic on port 80 for the web server. In this demo, for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to just disable the firewall D service altogether to keep things fairly straightforward and simple. So systemctl stop firewall D, and then we'll do a disable as well, so it does not start on boot. And we can do systemctl status firewall D, and we can see that it is indeed dead, not running. Last check I like to do is a netstat -an pipe grep :80, and this just shows us that there is a process listening on port 80. We know it's the Apache web server that we just configured. So let's test this out. Go to your browser and navigate to, I'm just going to use the local IP address of the server, and it comes up testing 1 2 3. So this is the default Apache test page. If you see this, then your web server is running. We do not have any HTML files defined, but if we go to var www html test01 public HTML, and we do something like echo hello world and redirect that to index.html, and we refresh the page, we can see hello world. Now for this example, I'm using a public domain name. It is configured in DNS, and I've configured my network firewall to allow the traffic as well as do any necessary port forwarding. So I'm going to test this out with the fully qualified domain name test01.broken.net, and I get the same page. So everything appears to be working. In the next video, I'm going to go over how to enable HTTPS, SSL, TLS for your web server that we just set up via a free service known as Let's Encrypt, where you can get a public SSL certificate. Show you how to use and install that. If you liked the video, if it was helpful, give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe.